It's Tuesday, February 12th, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On Barnstable Today, we learn more about a Barnstable police arrest last week for child pornography, talk to the Barnstable County public health nurse about cold and flu season, and share the do's and don'ts of getting near resting seal pups on Sandy Neck. First up, municipal news and notes. If you build it, they will come. To a Hyannis Harbor Hawks game. The Community Preservation Committee granted the Hawks money last year for field improvements, and their ongoing fundraising efforts for the Judy Walden Scarfile Field included the Boston Red Sox 2018 World Series trophy last week.
It's an exciting evening at Cape Cod Beer tonight. The Red Sox trophy is here, but more importantly, a brand new field coming for the Harbor Hawks. With me today, board member Peter Scarfile. Peter, tell us how this new field is taking shape.
Well, Paula, we started with a grant from the Community Preservation Committee from the town of Barnstable, $700,000 to kickstart the first phase of that. In addition to that, we're building new dugouts for another $120,000 or so, and then we're putting in a new 32-foot scoreboards, which will be the largest in southeastern Massachusetts, and we're signing that contract next week and for this spring. So we're going to have it for the summer Cape Cod Baseball League. And the proceeds from the event tonight will also go to help offset the cost of renovating the field.
What do you want the public to know about the Cape Cod Baseball League, and specifically the Hyannis Harbor Hawks? They're literally a linchpin of the Cape Cod Baseball League. You have so many people that come year after year as fans.
Well, first I'd like the people to know town of Barnstable, we're a not-for-profit organization, and our intent is to improve the downtown area. We also, a few years ago, about 5 years ago, invested $880,000 through grants and improvements to that field, including lights and a press box and other improvements as well. And this is another phase, and we want to do a third phase to improve the experience of downtown Hyannis. We want to bring people to downtown Hyannis. We want to have the merchants enjoy the benefits of having improved attendance. Our attendance has gone from last in the league to second in the league out of the 10 teams. So most of the teams, all the teams in the Cape Cod Baseball League draw well, and we're economic driver as well as pleasure is to watch, family-friendly, no charge to go in, people pass the hat, they make donations, and it's a fun thing for family entertainment as well.
So even the editor of Cape Cod Times really wants to see the trophy, right?
Well, you know, we haven't won a championship in what, 3-4 days? So we're nostalgic about winning, and so, but we're here to see the World Series trophy. No, it's actually very cool, and so, yeah, it's great that they're doing this. Good for the Harbor Hawks, and Cape Cod Beer obviously is a great venue to go see something.
How important was it to kick off a fundraiser with the World Champion trophy?
Oh, this is good, especially in the Boston area right now. The parade yesterday, the Super Bowl 2 nights ago, and then the trophy now, and spring training pitches and catches report next week. So it's almost baseball season, believe it or not. And hopefully our winter stays mild like it has so far, so people can think about the summer.
Any last message you want for the residents of Barnstable?
No, our opening day is Monday, June 10th. Come see a Harbor Hawk game this summer.
The Barnstable Police Department, working with the FBI, made a child pornography arrest last week. Chief Sonneman joins us to discuss the details and how the police department works with other law enforcement agencies in these cases. Catching bad guys, that's what the Barnstable Police Department does. With me today, the Chief of Police, Sonneman. How are you today?
Catching and hopefully not releasing.
Yes. Yeah, it's not like fishing, is it?
No, not catch and release.
Right, exactly.
Catch and keep.
Your team and some other officials from other agencies made an arrest this past week with some nefarious type of individual here in our community.
Last Tuesday, the FBI got in touch with us. They had an investigation going into a man in Marston's Mills, Stephen Carme, and they were doing some internet tracking and discovered that there were some questionable things going on, so they gave our detectives a call. They coordinated, went out and served a search warrant and found Mr. Carme. He was arrested and did end up getting charged with possession of child pornography. And they did seize some electronics, an iPhone and some computers and things like that. So now they're going through all that stuff to figure out exactly what the extent of the charges will be.
Right. Now, some people don't realize this, that the local police department, Barnstable PD specifically, works with a lot of different agencies in these types of cases, don't they?
Well, you do. Again, it comes down to kind of like resources. We do have a detective that's trained, Detective Kevin Connolly. There's a group, ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children, and what they do is they certify and train police officers and federal officers in means of detection through setting up accounts on the internet and monitoring other people. Because a lot of this stuff, it's not like you can just go to, like, there's not like a website you just like go to, like click on, like you know, eBay, and all of a sudden there. It's done through backdoors and back portals and interweb and things like that. But it's a lot of it's file sharing. So these individuals download and share files amongst each other. That's a group. And so obviously police have to set up like fake accounts and all of this stuff, trying to get into the group and try and figure out who's sharing stuff and where is it coming from. So then they trace it, because the IP addresses and all that other stuff, they can figure out where it's coming from. I couldn't do it, but these guys are trained on how to do it. They figure out where it's coming from, where the IP address is. It's kind of like your internet address, and it comes back. You can find out where they're doing this stuff from, and then we go out there and serve a search warrant, and hopefully you get their hard drives and things like that where they're storing the images and materials.
Right, and one of the things that kind of surprised me is in the old days of child pornography, the Postmaster General was really involved in this, because it was taking VHS tapes across state lines, but they're still involved.
But a lot of it went through the Postal Service.
Right.
You know, they mailed it. You know, back in the old days when you had to mail something, you couldn't internet it to somebody. You had to actually physically mail it. So the Postal Service was really involved in it then, and they still are to a large extent these days. Like I said, they work cooperatively with local agencies too, because the local agencies quite frequently know who these people actually are, have local knowledge of these different things. But like in our case of Kevin Connolly, he's actually set up to do these investigations. So sometimes he comes across these people, but then it turns out this person may be in Idaho. So you got to have that inter-cooperation between the federal and the locals, because you want as many eyes out there as possible trying to find these people, but you also have to have the reach to get them, because we obviously can't go to Idaho, and sometimes even the federal government coming here, you know, they may not be, you know, they got to have resources there locally to book, to transport, and other things like that to assist them with the different things going on.
Right. There's actually an organization, the Safe Act for Children.
It's the Project Safe Childhood, Project Safe Childhood. And it started back in 2006, and really what it does is it encourages local and federal cooperation to track down and find these people and prosecute them. Because a lot of times the federal laws are much stricter a lot in these things, and the prison time and everything is much more significant than what it might be locally. So, well, the other thing is, you know, you're dealing with interstate commerce, because it's over the internet, it's crossing state lines, it could be going outside the country and inside the country. So, you know, involving the federal government that has the power to prosecute those types of crimes really is beneficial.
Right. And then even in this, our community, Children's Cove does an enormous amount of work with the victims. And I know that Barnstable Police does work very closely with them. Tell us a little bit about this agency and how people can avail themselves to their services.
Yes, we do. We work with them quite frequently. They go out and they're actually out in the community. They do a little bit of training. They do a little bit of education. They educate our officers. They do a lot of work with the victims in these cases, like you were saying. They do a lot of the interviews. They document a lot of stuff. But then they provide the family with resources to get them through these tough times, and educate the family and help them through and support them through. Because, you know, a lot of times the criminal justice system, it's good about focusing on the offender and punishing somebody, but sometimes the victim kind of gets left in the dust a little bit. And you see it in the paper where victims, you know, they just kind of get left behind a little bit. So a lot of agencies, including our own and Children's Cove, have victim witness advocates now who really focus on just making sure the victims have the support they need, the counseling and everything else, because you got to pick up the pieces after something like this happens.
Right. And they're locally available. People can call them if they think that their child's been victimized. And hopefully, you know, you keep catching these bad guys.
Keep catching them. And I just want to make clear that in this case involving this individual from Marstonville, there were no victims that we're aware of necessarily. It was just image sharing and things like that. So we don't suspect at this point that there was any kind of involvement with children or anything else like that. So, but it just, parents got to be mindful, you know, and it comes back to the swatting thing we talked about the other day, where the internet makes it so much easier for people to be anonymous and do things without being actually there. And with kids these days being so tech savvy, maybe a little too smart for their britches in certain things, and getting into chat rooms and online gaming, and this is where these predators now, where they used to have actual face-to-face interaction with their victims, are now finding easier ways to get to the kids. Just like the police officers set up fake accounts to find these guys, you find that a lot of these people set up fake accounts to make themselves look like kids or whatever, and attractive to their target audience. So parents, pay attention, be involved, know what your kids are doing and who they're talking to on the internet, because you never know what'll happen.
Great advice, Chief. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Sniffle, cough, sneeze. So many cold viruses and infections at this time of year. It seems like we're always sick. Barnstable County Public Health Nurse Deidre Arvidsson joins us in studio to talk about immunization services and more. It's cold and flu season here in the town of Barnstable as well as Cape Cod. Lots of different things going around out there. With me today, the Barnstable County nurse and Deidre Arvidsson. You're joining us today to kind of talk about what's out there for resources for folks that either still need a flu shot, which I highly recommend, or some of the other resources that the county nurse does provide. So let's start with a little bit about you and what you do at the county.
Okay, well, I've been a nurse for about 27 years. And I've been in this position as the county public health nurse for the last 9 years. And one of our programs that we offer is a public immunization program right in my office, 2 days a week. Right now it's currently Tuesday and Wednesdays by appointment, so just call, make an appointment, we'll get you in. And we do every adult recommended vaccine, some of the children's vaccines, and travel vaccines too, including Japanese encephalitis. We will have yellow fever back, hopefully in June, but people can still get a flu shot. It's important to get a flu shot to help prevent the flu. Even if you get the flu with the flu shot, it's probably not going to be as severe. Okay, and we provide them still. We have plenty of flu vaccine. Also, if you're 65 or older, you want to get the pneumonia shots.
Right.
There's 2 of them right now, the Prevnar 13 and the Pneumovax 23. You want to make sure you've had both of them. You can get them, if you've never had any, get the Prevnar 13 first, and then a year later, get the Pneumovax 23. Okay. That's the ideal way.
That's really important. And talking about flu a little bit, there's so many viruses, bacterial or viral, that just kind of like appear here on the Cape. There's been an upper respiratory one going. Let's talk a little bit about the difference of flu and everything else Cape Cod creeping crud out there.
Okay. So the CDC puts out a great brochure. It's called Get Smart. Okay. You can look at it online too, cold or flu. Antibiotics don't work for you.
Okay.
So it basically tells you a little bit about how do I know if I have a viral or bacterial infection. Because colds are caused by viruses in general, and and an antibiotic will do nothing for a virus. It won't cut it short. It won't prevent you from giving it to somebody else. And it just won't make you feel better any sooner. And that's a total misconception that some people do have.
And bacterial, so the viral just runs its course, right?
Yeah.
3 to 7, 10 days kind of thing. And
Yeah.
bacterial is where you would get an antibiotic?
Right, it could be. It
Okay.
could be. You want to, usually when there's a bacterial infection, you have a fever. That's not uncommon. The other thing I wanted to mention is some people say the mucus that you get from your nose or cough up, from clear to yellow or green, does that mean you need an antibiotic? Because sometimes people think that. And that's not true either. Yellow or green mucus does not mean that you have a bacterial infection. It's normal to change color and get thicker, so it's not. It can be used to treat antibiotics for strep throat. Sometimes, yep, because you don't want to get, scarlet fever from that. So sometimes, you really have to go to your provider and get an examination. Just because you're uncomfortable, stuffy, and feeling miserable does not mean you need antibiotics. Sometimes a sinus infection sometimes will warrant antibiotic use.
Right. And then the flu, I've always heard that when you get the flu, it comes on like a Mack truck.
Correct. That's usually the case. It comes on suddenly. And the key there is that as soon as you feel like you have the flu, if you weren't sick and then you're incredibly sick, go get a flu test so that you can be part of those statistics, and also so that you can get on an antiviral right away, because that's important to get it within the first few days to hopefully reduce the course. It's not going to make it go away right away, but it will hopefully reduce the course and severity of your flu.
Right. And there's some other programs that you're out there in the community with. We were talking pre-interview. I hadn't realized this, but a lot of the food pantries have nurse services now. Well, your nurses are there. Tell us a little bit about that program. I thought that was fascinating.
Okay, well, I started a program around 2011 called Ask a Public Health Nurse. And it started in one pantry. And I brought health literature, health resources. I did free blood pressure screening and offered free flu shots to clients and staff during the season. And that has grown. That has grown to we are in almost all food pantries, especially the larger ones from Bourne to Provincetown, and a couple soup kitchens and the baby center. Usually a couple times a month. We offer, our nurses are great because you can come up and ask them questions, that you wouldn't have time to in a doctor's office.
Right.
Okay, and we have resources that are available to them. Public health nurses do a lot of education out in the community, and that's what we do. We also collaborated with Falmouth Service Center, who initially had a grant to fund what they called Foods to Encourage program, which some of the pantries are choosing to do. And that's a little more structured. It's for clients who have hypertension, diabetes, or pre-diabetes, and they can come on a weekly basis to have their numbers checked. And in exchange for that, they receive an extra bag of produce, free bag of produce. They receive medical or nursing education, one little piece, and there's also a nutritionist on hand to answer any nutrition questions, especially regarding how to prepare the produce that they're given. Usually there's a sample involved, and that has been a really successful program.
And successful by means that people who are educated about their chronic illnesses tend to, number one, manage them better and maybe kind of alleviate some of the chronic things that happen with those illnesses as well, right?
Absolutely. We've seen blood pressures come down. We've seen a reduction in blood sugars. In some of these locations, we've also found people who did not know they had diabetes from just coming to our program, and we were able to hook them up with a primary care doctor to manage their illness. And yes, what happens is if you have a chronic illness and are able to check in with somebody more frequently, it does help to keep any kind of exacerbations of that illness down and potentially keep you out of the hospital or the emergency room.
Right. And you talked a lot about all the immunizations available through your office. Flu season still here, going to be here till
Absolutely.
March, but you told me that flu vaccine is good for a year?
Yeah, every year you're supposed to get a new flu vaccine, basically, because what happens is the Centers for Disease Control have surveillance all over the world, really, and in the World Health Organization, sentinel sites to determine which are the most commonly circulating flu viruses. And that's what they base the next year's configuration of viruses on the flu shot. So, and we also do all adult recommended vaccines. Adults are recommended more vaccines today than they ever were.
Right.
So that's important to stay immunized. There's so many illnesses out there that there are not even vaccines for. So it's important that to take advantage of the vaccines that we have.
Right. So they can call your office?
Absolutely.
Do you have a number that they can call?
508-375-6617.
Great, and they can always go to the county website and see
Yes.
information for you there as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. This was very informative, and let's hope that we all stay healthy.
I hope so too. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Seal pups are weaned from their mothers at the tender age of 6 to 8 weeks and are off on their own at this time of the year. Natural Resource Officer Sean Cordes has some reminders for you when you're out on the beach. Shh! Baby seals are resting. We're here out at Sandy Neck, and we have a baby seal resting on the beach. With me today, Natural Resource Officer Sean Cordes. Sean, a little baby seal right out there for us today.
Yeah, it worked out well. This is sort of the time of year where we start to see them on our beaches quite a bit. Generally with the juvenile seals in the beginning of the year, through late winter, early spring, they're hauling up on the beaches to rest as they're sort of spending their first year on their own, learning to hunt and feed and survive.
Right. So they have been weaned, and their weaning period is very short with their mother. So they're literally on their own after 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a very short time nursing, and as far as parental care goes, after that period, the parents aren't teaching them how to hunt and feed. So they're sort of out on their own. They got to learn how to catch fish, how to survive, and save up that energy through the winter and make it through really probably the hardest part of the year as far as weather conditions and resources go.
Right. And learning to fish, so they're kind of hauled out and resting right now because they're not very successful at it.
Exactly. So that's the thing. They're until they become efficient at it, they're wasting a lot of more energy than they should be in order to get the calories and the energy that they need to survive. So for the most part, this time of year, you're going to see them hauled up a lot more, and that's not always abnormal for them to do. Because they're marine mammals, oftentimes people think they belong in the water the whole time, which is true for a lot of marine mammals like whales and dolphins. They need to be in the water. But seals, they actually need to go up on land from time to time in order to survive.
Right. So when you're doing these, observations, when do you start to get concerned that the seal isn't well?
So there's a number of things we take into account with that. We definitely want to go out and from a very safe distance be able to check those animals and see if there's anything obvious. So, first would be something like lacerations, bruises, scrapes, that sort of stuff. And even that's not always necessarily an issue. Some of those can be superficial, but that's usually one of the more obvious things just that, can be noticed. And then behavior is very big as well. So oftentimes if there's any sort of abnormal behavior, for instance, some seals when they're in distress they'll start eating sand and rocks, which can be a big issue. Down here, oftentimes those animals are used to being up north where there's snow and ice that they would be ingesting instead. And then, any sort of respiratory issues, so how they're breathing, if they're panting, and just other behavioral issues, so if they're really lethargic or they just don't seem to be moving the way that they should. We take all that into consideration. We don't make any sort of final determination. We work with IFA. We have a really good working relationship with them, and ultimately we'll pass all that information on, and they can make a determination on whether or not an animal just needs some time to rest on the beach, or if it might need to be taken in for rehab or something like that.
And as a natural resource officer, even you folks don't want to get close to these animals because they do imprint.
Exactly. So that's the thing is, the most important thing is to give these animals their space so that if they are just resting, we're not disturbing them and forcing them back into the water when they don't need to be. all of this time that they have is really crucial for that. So if a seal is getting disturbed and it's forced back into the water when it's trying to rest, that'll start to catch up to it, and you'll notice that they'll they become more lethargic and they're not able to have the energy to hunt. And then sometimes we'll see those issues with the seals that are emaciated out here as well. That's another factor we take into account during observations.
Kind of like a toddler without a nap.
Yeah, exactly.
So what advice do you have for people that are out here hiking? Obviously today was a beautiful day. It's like spring out here. What do you have for advice for folks if they encounter one of these animals?
Yeah, so a few things. It's definitely important. We always appreciate the information if someone does encounter an animal. Even if it's a healthy animal, it's always nice to be able to report that. So here at Sandy Neck Beach, you can call the Sandy Neck Gatehouse, and we have the resources and ability to go out and respond and observe. Otherwise, the IFA Marine Mammal Hotline, you can contact that number, and they'd be able to sort of guide you through the steps of what other information might be required. Other than that, there's a few really important things to keep in mind, that these animals are federally protected. You are required to keep at least 150 feet away from the animal. And truly we recommend more than that. If you notice that the seal is looking up at you or it's moving away and it can clearly see that you're around, then you want to take a few more steps back and give that animal its space and the ability for it to rest. Binoculars are a great thing to have because you can always get those really cool sort of up-close observations without having to disturb an animal. Another thing is dogs. So out here we get a lot of dogs, and it's really important, even if it was an area where a dog was allowed off leash, you want to get your dog back and leash it up and make sure that it's safe for both the animal's safety and for your pet safety. Seals and dogs are very closely related in the grand scheme of things, and they do have the ability to transfer some of those diseases between each other. And so, that's certainly one thing we don't want to see for either animal, is to run into an issue like that. And then, yeah, it's just a matter of keeping in mind, that these animals they do come out of the water from time to time, and they don't necessarily, it's best if we sort of keep our distance and let them do their thing, and then let IFA sort of make the determination on if there's something more than that. So we don't want to get too close to the animal and, disturb it or anything like that. We've had, unfortunately, instances where people have put blankets on seals because they thought they were cold or lonely or, something like that, which, people probably mean well, but unfortunately that's very bad for the animal. So.
Right, so let them rest. Toddlers need their sleep.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yep. Thanks so much, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.
Here's a look at things to do, places to go, and people to meet. Save the date. The Barnstable Clean Water Coalition and the Barnstable Natural Resources Department are seeking volunteers to count herring at the Mill and Middle Pond fish ladders this spring. The annual Marston's Mills River Herring Count meeting is March 16th at 9 a.m. at the Osterville Village Library. The family-friendly activity only takes 10 minutes a day. Volunteers are needed beginning April 1st. To volunteer or for more information, contact Heather Rockwell at hrockwell@bccleanwater.org or by calling 508-420-0780. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. Email us or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.